Being 2 p.m, we'll move to question time. I'll call Senator Hughes.
Question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Yesterday in question time you stated, what is it that the Prime Minister Albanese hasn't done to help the Australian people? Minister, can you confirm that the Prime Minister has not decreased power prices for Australian families by $275, despite promising 97 times before the election that he would do so?
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Minister Farrell.
He's across everything, this bloke.
Senators, I've just called the minister to his feet.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Hughes for her question and the opportunity to talk again about what a terrific job our Prime Minister is doing when he's not progressing the issue of recognition of an Indigenous voice to this parliament. Of course, he's dealing with all of the issues which, regrettably, the former government, your government that you were part of, Senator Hughes, simply failed to do. And so, bit by bit, we're trying to restore the Australian economy, deal with all of those serious cost of living pressures that every single family is facing right at the moment because of your neglect of things like an energy policy, things like dealing with the issue of climate change. Each day, the Prime Minister wakes up and thinks, how can I help Australian families to reduce and push down the cost of living for hard-working Australian families. That's what this Prime Minister is focused on. Not picking up sort of other ministries from other members of his cabinet, but dealing with the serious issues that are facing Australian people as a result of those 9 or 10 years of neglect under your former government.
Senator Hughes for supplementary.
Minister, you said yesterday the Prime Minister has done so much to reduce the cost of living. Can you please name a single cost to Australian families that is lower now than when the Albanese government was elected?
Minister Farrell.
What's gone down, Don?
So,
what's gone down?
thank you.
Order, Minister Farrell. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Hughes for her supplementary questions. What did we do when we first came to government? We supported a rise in the minimum wage for ordinary Australian workers. What was your policy at the time? Your policy, as
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes.
Point of order, Madam President, relevance, and in a bid to ensure we don't get another 30 seconds of ums and ahs. The question was very specific as to naming a single cost for Australian families that has come down. A single cost.
Thank you,
and I appreciate you redirecting the minister to the question.
Senator Hughes. The minister did start off with a bit of a preamble, but as you got to your feet, he had started to name some costs. You mightn't agree with them, but he was being relevant to your question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And of course, Senator Hughes wouldn't agree with what I'm about to say, but let's go through some of the things that have been the subject of downward pressure as a result of the work done by the Prime Minister and the rest of these wonderful people. So we've cut the price of the PBS medicines from $42.50 down to $30. No, you don't
Minister
like me
Farrell.
talking about. You don't like me
Minister
talking about
Farrell.
the things that have gone down because we've
Minister
been doing
Farrell,
some.
The time for answering has expired, and senators, I was trying to draw the minister to sit down, but there was so much noise in this chamber, he was unable to hear me. He is answering questions asked by opposition senators, and I'm certainly entitled to hear the answer, as are other senators. Senator Hughes, second supplementary.
President, does the Prime Minister follow your rule, Minister, and not closely follow power prices or grocery prices? Is this why the Prime Minister Albanese thinks Australians have a pretty good 10 months despite their electricity bills, grocery bills, mortgage repayments and rent all going up? Does this show how out of touch your government is?
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Hughes for her second question. Look, I have to say I was a bit disappointed in the way in which the leader, in particular, put up items on his Facebook page yesterday about seeking to misrepresent my views by cutting.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes.
Point of order relevance here. This is a very serious question affecting everyday Australians, and they're raising prices that they're facing everywhere. And I would appreciate the Minister being relevant to the question.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. I'm glad that you Senator Watt, I'm glad you pointed out it's a serious question. I would hope all questions are serious, and I would ask senators to remain silent so that we can all hear the answers. I will direct the minister to your question. Minister.
Thank you, President. And as I was saying, my staff recommended that I perhaps request that this Facebook page be taken down because it is in fact in breach of the rules. But when we discovered that there were only 71 likes to this particular Facebook page, we decided not to.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Hughes.
Madam President, this question was not with regards to Senator Farrell or Senator Birmingham's social media.
Senator Hughes,
and I would ask that the minister, in his last 8 seconds, address at least part of the question.
Senator Hughes, when raising a point of order, please come directly to the point. You will note your last point of order. I directed the minister to your question, and I'll direct him again. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Look, there is no person in this country who is more concerned about cost of living.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Farrell. Order. Order. Senator Payman.
My question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister please tell us how the government is assisting Australian households to deal with cost of living pressures?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Payman for her question. And I can provide an update to the chamber on how the government is working hard and is focused on how we can make life easier for each and every Australian. We are certainly aware of Australians who are facing tough times with some of the increases in the cost of living. And these, of course, some of them, in relation to power, have been caused by the ongoing war in Ukraine, which has driven up gas prices. There's continued disruption on our supply chains following years of chaos and impacted, of course, by the pandemic, and that there are the successive interest rate rises that we've seen as the Reserve Bank, which started on its tightening arrangements before the last election. But there are other factors that we can address where we are. One of the very first acts of the Albanese government was to successfully argue for a minimum wage to keep pace with inflation, an outcome which helped around 2.7 million Australians and was a real change in approach between us and the former government on wages. Our first budget focused on responsible cost of living relief that didn't put extra pressure on inflation. That's one of the most important things in terms of our investments. So they were things like cheaper childcare, expanding paid parental leave, cheaper medicines, more affordable housing and getting wages moving again. In addition, as winter approaches, we're providing and will provide through the budget energy relief to millions of households, payments that those opposite opposed. These households will pay up to a third less than the retail price when their energy bills come in, and again it beggars belief that those opposite decided to oppose the laws that put in place those arrangements. And of course, and I'll go to this more in the next questions, our investments in early education and care.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
In 100
Order. I have a senator on her feet. Senator Payman.
100 days, cheaper childcare will be a reality for millions of Australian families. How will the government's investment in early childhood education and care assist with cost of living pressures, Minister?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Payman, for being on the same page in relation to early education and care. In 100 days, cheaper early childhood education and care will provide cost of living relief for around 1.2 million Australian families. The milestone comes as new data from the Department of Education reveals that childcare costs had soared by 49% under the previous government. From July, the Albanese government is taking action to deliver that real cost of living relief, and we know for parents who have children under the age of 5 just what a hit those childcare costs are to the weekly household budget. For the average family on about $120,000 a year, with a child in care 3 days a week, the changes will cut costs by about $1,700 a year. The childcare subsidy rates will lift to 90% for families on a combined income of $80,000 or less, and the highest subsidies of up to 95% for families with second and subsequent children will be retained.
Second supplementary.
Can the minister confirm, in the lead-up to the budget, any further support from the government to combat the cost of living?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Payman for her supplementary. We are taking action, as this chamber knows, because we debated them in December last year. We want to take the sting out of higher power prices through direct energy bill relief through the next budget, direct support for households and businesses that, let us not forget, those opposite tried to block. There are encouraging signs that our plan on energy prices are beginning to work, with big drops in the prices on the electricity futures market. We're also focused on growing the economy in the right way so more Australians can get the benefit from good skills, get good jobs and earn good wages. That's why we successfully argued for the Fair Work Commission minimum wage increase in line with inflation. So we've got legislation around cleaner and cheaper energy. We've brought in a new pensioner work bonus. We're working on the new housing accord, and we've got important legislation before this chamber that will assist with cost of living pressures on Australian households.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. According to government analysis, by how much have rental rates gone up since the election of the Albanese Labor government?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Van for the question. Look, I don't think we want to start this, or certainly I don't want to start this process of trying to score sort of political points on cheap political point scoring.
Minister Farrell. Senator Birmingham.
President, I think the minister is impugning motives from Senator Van in what was otherwise a question entirely seeking a point of fact. Now, Murray's bringing some talking points forward to the table for poor Don, but I think you should bring him to order in terms of impugning motives on the senator who purely asked a factual question.
Please resume your seat. Order. 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 I don't believe there was an imputation against the actual senator. So I'm going to call the minister and remind him of the question and the need for an answer. Senator Van.
Point of order on relevance. The minister has gone nowhere near the question.
Senator Van, if you were listening, you would have heard me draw the minister back to the question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And what I, rather than sort of answering cheap political questions, what I'd like to talk about is what I'd like to do is talk about what this government is actually doing in practical terms to put downward pressure on the rental stress that so many Australians are now suffering. Obviously, one of the things that we can do is try and boost the supply of homes to rent, and substantial and significant investment in new social and affordable housing. It's these things, Senator Van, which will result in practical downward pressure on the rental stress that Australians that are on the Australian people right
Minister
at the
Farrell,
moment.
please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Order on question of direct relevance. This was quite a precise question. I accept the minister as being generally relevant to the question of rental markets and rental affordability, but there was a precise question there about how much rental rates have gone up. If the minister doesn't know, he can take it on notice and provide context, but simply talking around the margins of it is not directly relevant.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I am not privy to what government analysis Senator Van is directing us towards, but I will remind Senator Birmingham, please. Senator Birmingham, I have taken your point of order in good faith. I am simply explaining to you I'm not aware how broad or how narrow the government analysis is, but I will direct the minister to the second part of the question. Minister.
Thank you, President, and a little bit of respect from the leader for the chair would be appreciated. Yes, seriously. Yes, seriously. A little bit of respect for the President. A little bit of respect. Now, we know a whole lot of people across Australia.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Van.
And again, direct relevance. I mean, the minister cannot just waffle on down a different path.
Senator Van, your leader was on his feet with the exact same question. I have directed the minister to the question.
Chair, he hasn't listened.
No, it's not. You've raised a point of order. I've responded to that. Your leader raised exactly the same point of order. I've directed the minister to the question, and it's not for you to debate it with me. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And if your side stopped interjecting, then I could answer your question, because we know a lot of people across Australia are struggling.
Minister Farrell, their time has expired. Senator Van.
Given the success with that one, can the minister, or according to government analysis, how much more is an average standard variable mortgage rate holder paying per month on an average mortgage since the election of the Albanese Labor government?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Van for his supplementary question. Well, again, I'm not going to get into gotcha questions. This government is trying to put downward pressure on a whole lot of items that are making life difficult for ordinary Australian.
Minister Farrell. Senator Van.
President, again, direct relevance. The question was quite narrow in its phrasing, and if the minister doesn't know the answer, you can take it on notice and come back to the chamber.
Thank you, Senator Van. The minister did respond to the question, but I'll draw him back to the question again. Minister.
Thank you, President. we understand the pressures that Australian families are under. We've talked previously in your previous question about the issue of rental affordability. Now you're talking about the issue of mortgage rates. We have been working solidly to put downward pressure on all of these items that are affecting ordinary working Australians. Now,
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Second supplementary, Senator Van.
Thank you, President. Given the minister has demonstrated he is unaware of or unconcerned by the cost of living pressures faced by Australians, is he aware that Westpac Business Bank forecasts advertised rents will increase by 11.5% in 2023? And, Minister, is it correct that this will be the biggest annual increase on record?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President, and thank Senator Van for his second supplementary question.
Senator Watt.
I completely reject your proposition, Senator Van. This is a government that's deeply concerned about cost of living issues facing ordinary Australian people. We every day focus on how we can put downward pressure on the cost of living based on the financial mess that you left us and we inherited when we came to government almost 12 months ago. Australians are facing these issues because of the inaction and the neglect of the former government in respect of all of these issues. Bit by bit, inch by inch, day by day, we're taking...
expired. Senator Rice.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator Watt. Minister, across the country, state governments are proposing actions to limit gambling because of the harm it causes to children and the community. And reflecting this, the Greens in New South Wales are taking a policy to the election on Saturday of phasing out pokie machines from pubs and clubs, introducing a mandatory cashless gambling card and creating a pokie super tax and reparation fund for affected communities. But it's up to the federal government to ban gambling advertising, which is something that is supported by 70% of Australians. Minister, will the government move to ban gambling advertising anywhere, any time, in the same way as tobacco advertising was banned years ago?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Rice. Thank you for giving us an election manifesto from the New South Wales Greens. I'm not sure, Senator Rice, whether you were here yesterday when I pretty much answered an identical question from Senator Pocock. So I could refer you back to my answer yesterday, but I'm happy to go through it again today. There is no doubt that the Albanese government recognises the importance of gambling promotions being presented in a responsible manner. And we know, the Greens know a little bit about gambling because we know who their donors have been. We also recognise there is ongoing community concern about the harms associated with online gambling, including advertising material, and it is timely for the parliament to consider what more should be done to address this issue. And I hope that we can rely on the Greens' support, despite their large donations from gambling interests. This is why we have established an inquiry into online gambling and its impacts on those experiencing gambling harm. And as I mentioned yesterday, that inquiry is being conducted by the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is being very capably chaired by Peter Murphy, one of our fabulous Labor MPs. The committee is considering the effectiveness of current gambling advertising restrictions on limiting children's exposure to gambling products and services, including through social media, sponsorship or branding, among a range of other issues. Of course, the government will consider the committee's recommendations when it releases its final report. The current rules relating to the scheduling and content of advertisements on television are contained in the Co-Regulatory Broadcasting Codes of Practice. Those codes are developed under the Broadcasting Services Act 1992 by industry groups in consultation with the Australian Communications and Media Authority. There is some work to be done here. The Albanese government is on the job. There's a House committee on the job, and we look forward to seeing its recommendations.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. So in terms of a ban, at this stage it's a no. Minister, it was a Labor government that refused tobacco donations and introduced changes to tobacco packets that protected people to reduce harm. Will you commit to refusing gambling donations and taking action to protect people from gambling harm?
Minister Watt.
Well, thank you, President. Again, I'm rather surprised that the Greens are choosing to use a question about whether we will ban the very kind of donations that the Greens have been receiving. So you're asking a Labor government to ban you from taking donations from the gambling industry. Is that what this is about?
Please resume your seat. Senator Rice.
Yeah, look, a point of order, President. The minister is misleading the parliament. The Greens do not take donations from gambling companies.
Senator Rice, it's a debating point. Minister Watt. Minister Watt, please continue.
There's a briefing here.
Minister Watt, I've called 3 times.
Sorry, President. I'm just so surprised that the Greens are asking us to stop them from taking donations that they have been taking for a number of years from the gambling industry. I mean, let me remind you, Senator Rice, in 2022 the Queensland Greens accepted almost $500,000 in donations from a $500,000 from a high-rolling gambler, despite pushing for a ban on political donations from the gambling industry. In 2019-20, the Queensland Greens MP, Mr Berkman, had been critical of the LNP and Labor for accepting donations from gambling interests, but the highest donation in an election year in Queensland in 2019 was indeed to the Greens from Mr Turk.
Senator Rice, it's time.
It is time, yes.
I'll
it's
take
time
to
refuse donations from gambling companies. Gambling companies.
Order.
Yeah, the gambling industry, gambling countries. Minister, yeah, it's the
Senator
industry.
Rice.
It's the insidious, harmful industry.
Senator Rice, just please resume your seat because I can't hear you and the chamber needs to come to order. 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 I haven't heard the question and I don't think Senator Rice has finished the question, but would you start it again, please?
I haven't started the question. I'm just correcting the record. Minister, it is clear that what is needed at a federal level is a national gambling regulator, including to tackle the harm caused by online gambling, which is national and international. Will the government introduce a national gambling regulator?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, as I say, the government, the House of Representatives, is conducting an inquiry into these matters at the moment, and I do look forward to its recommendations on what we can do about what is a very serious issue. But I'm interested to note that Senator Rice seems to be enunciating the Greens' position is that they don't support gambling donations from companies, but donations from individual high-roller gambles are fine. So does that mean that every time we hear the Greens say that we should ban donations from coal and gas companies, that would be okay for the Greens to take donations from Clive Palmer, who owns coal companies, or Gina Rinehart? So no to their companies, but fine for their— I mean, Mr Turpie, the high-roller gambler, has been— The Greens don't like it when they're held to account, and Senator McKim is chief among them. You come in here and mouth off constantly about what other parties should do, but the very minute your own hypocrisy is exposed, all you want to do is shout people down. You are a joke, you are a hypocrite, and you're finally being exposed.
Order. Senator Watt, I do remind you to direct your marks to the chair. Senator Green. Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Special Minister of State, Senator Farrell. On this historic day, can the minister update the Senate about the progress to recognise First Nations Australians in the Constitution and to deliver an Indigenous voice to Parliament?
Minister Farrell.
Yes, I can, as a matter of fact, Senator Green, and thank you for the question and your great interest in this topic. And I should start by congratulating everybody in this Parliament or in the Senate for the mature way in which the issue of the referendum legislation was dealt with last night, and congratulate yourselves on passing of that legislation without any opposition in this place. But it is another historic day today, a significant day in the journey towards an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. And we've had the opportunity for Australia to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia in our Constitution. This will be a simple but powerful act. The proposition that it is to be put to the Australian people has been built from the ground up through the work of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. This process is the culmination of years of discussion, consultation and hard work by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. As the Prime Minister said in his gracious and patient ask of Australia, I want to thank the Chamber for the goodwill, of course, demonstrated last night in respect of the referendum machinery bill. This will be the first referendum in almost a quarter of a century where a new generation of Australians will be able to have their say. The government believes this referendum will be a unifying moment for Australia, and I'm certainly keen for that to be the case. It's about taking this country forward for everyone. We look forward to working with the Australian community to ensure everyone can have their say in a respectful manner on this important opportunity to recognise our first Australians.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Ahead of the Voice referendum, what is the government doing to implement Labor's long-standing commitment to improve voter enrolment and participation?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and again thank Senator Green for that question and her interest in voter enrolment. And since we took office, we've wasted no time on this issue. Last year, I asked JSCAM to investigate increasing enfranchisement and electoral participation and look forward to working across the parliament on meaningful reform following its report. Last year, the government allocated $16.1 million to the Australian Electoral Commission over 2 years to increase First Nations enrolment and participation in future electoral events as part of the referendum preparatory work. More recently, I approved regulatory changes making it easier for more Australians eligible to enrol to actually get on the roll. From the 17th of February, eligible Australians have been able to use their Medicare card and their Australian citizenship certificate numbers to enrol and or update their enrolment.
Early Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, it is important that First Nations people have their say at this referendum. Can the minister update the Senate about the steps the government is taking to improve Indigenous enrolment particularly?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister.
Thank you, President. And I can say, thank you, Senator Green, I can say that early AEC data from around the country shows that between 11% and 14% of new enrolment applications are using those new methods of enrolment that I mentioned before. One outstanding initiative from the Gillard Labor government was the Federal Direct Enrolment Update Program, which uses information from the government agencies to assist with updating elector details and including eligible voters on the roll. Following trials of the new direct enrolment activities, which use new data sources, mailbag addresses and email notifications of new enrolments, the AEC advises that over 15,000 Indigenous Australians were added to the electoral roll. Following these successful trials, the AEC advises me that these activities will be included as a permanent feature of our enrolment program. The estimated Indigenous enrolment rates—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. This question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Senator Farrell, and it has no preamble. How many homes will Tasmania get under the Housing Australia Future Fund in the first 5 years?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell, and thank you for your interest in this initiative of the federal government to try and increase the number of and access to homes by ordinary Australians.
Order.
Thank you, President. We're ensuring through a range of significant policy initiatives that Australians have greater access not only to home ownership but also to greater rental affordability.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Tyrrell.
Point of order, Chair. Relevance, I asked for a very specific question.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. I'll remind the Minister of your question.
Thank you, President. And of course, unfortunately, as data has shown, that in the period from 2016 to 2021, there was regrettably a substantial increase in Tasmanians experiencing homelessness, and I think this is really what your question is directed to. Tasmania has a strong community housing provider sector and has taken many opportunities provided by the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation. Of course,
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Tyrrell.
I know I'm new, but I thought it was a very plain question. Thank you.
I have directed the Minister to your question and I will direct him once again. Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister.
So, just recently, Minister Collins was in Launceston to turn the sod on the site of 48 affordable new homes for Tasmanians in need, with the community housing provider Community Housing Limited. The Albanese government has unlocked up to $575 million in funding from the National Housing Infrastructure Facility to be able to invest in new, social and affordable—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell's first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The government's commitment that Housing Australia Future Fund will make independent decisions is admirable. With that commitment in mind, though, who decided the fund would allocate 10,000 homes to frontline workers?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell, for her question. The issue that you've just raised, of course, was an election promise that the Albanese government took to the last election. Yep. So, in terms of who decided that issue, well, of course, it was the Australian people, because the Australian people elected the Albanese government to be the government of this country, and of course, what we are doing now with our housing policies is implementing those decisions which we took to the people at the last election. So, in terms of who decided this, well, ultimately, it was—
Minister Farrell, the time for answering has expired. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Okay. Thank you, President. On current projections, in the next 5 years, 1,100 Tasmanians will be homeless. Does your government agree that reducing homelessness by building 1,200 homes in Tasmania is a good thing?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Look, to be honest with you, Senator Tyrrell, I think you're just focusing on one small aspect of what the government is proposing to do. Let me tell you about some of the things this government is doing by comparison to what the previous government did not do.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Minister Farrell, order on my left. Senator Watt, I've just called the chamber to order. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. $10 billion investment to improve housing outcomes in Australia. 20,000 social homes, including 4,000 homes for women and children impacted by domestic violence and older women at risk of homelessness. 10,000 affordable homes for frontline workers. $30 million for housing and services for veterans. $200 million to repair, maintain and improve housing in remote Indigenous communities.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Tyrrell.
Order, President. Look, I appreciate all that they're doing, but it was a very simple question, and I'm here to represent Tasmania, not
Thank
the
you.
government.
I will again direct the minister to your question, Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Tyrrell, all of those things are things that
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Farrell. Yesterday, during question time, you declared to the Senate what the Prime Minister Albanese says he does. Mr Albanese said not once but on 97 separate occasions that Australians were going to see a reduction of $275 in their power bills. Minister, when will Australians get a $275 reduction to their power bills?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Minister Farrell.
Thank you.
Order on my right. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank the senator for his question, which seems to be a repeat of questions asked earlier in the week. And I have to say,
Order.
on a historic day, when the Prime Minister announces the recognition of an Indigenous voice to Parliament, here I am at the third question, where we haven't had a single question about the big issue of the day.
Order.
Now,
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator O'Sullivan.
Relevance. Clearly my question was about electricity bills and the prices that Australians can expect to pay, and we're getting an answer on the voice.
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. I will draw the minister to the question. Minister Farrell.
Prime Minister Albanese, just like myself, is deeply concerned about the issue of electricity. President, the Prime Minister, and myself are deeply concerned about the issue of electricity prices in this country for ordinary working Australians and businesses, for that matter. Now, the reality is that the reason that we find ourselves in a situation with escalating electricity prices is the 10 long years of inaction by the former government on the pressures in relation to electricity prices and, of course, the issue of climate change. Now, what did we do as soon as the Prime Minister? What did we do as soon as we came into government? We took action. We took action on electricity prices. We sought to put a cap on gas prices. We sought to put a cap on coal prices to push the price of electricity down. And what did your mob do? You voted against it. You wanted to keep electricity prices high. You wanted to keep electricity.
Has expired. Senator O'Sullivan, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Does Labor's Powering Australia plan say, and I quote, it will cut power prices for families and businesses by $275 a year?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Look, we've taken all of the action that we've done in respect of power prices to put downward pressure on electricity prices in this country to repair the neglect of the previous 9 years of neglect from your government.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator O'Sullivan.
Point of order on direct relevance. The question asked very simply whether or not the Labor's Powering Australia plan will say it will cut power bills for families and businesses by $225 a year.
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Senator O'Sullivan, please resume your seat. Senator O'Sullivan, you were on a point of order. Well, there was so much interjection, it was very hard to hear. I will rule on the point of order. I will direct the minister to your question, and I will also ask the minister to. You're seeking leave now. Yes.
I seek leave.
Is leave granted?
Well, I haven't explained what.
Leave is
President,
not granted. Order. Order.
With respect, President.
No, it's not with respect, Senator O'Sullivan. I asked if leave was granted, and the answer was no. There's no point debating it with me. Please resume your seat. I have the minister on his feet.
Thank you, President. It is customary when somebody's seeking to table a document to. Well, look, I don't know.
Order.
I don't know what the senator has got in his hand. The leader yesterday had the courtesy to hand me a copy of the document that he wanted to put forward, and I'm happy to look at any document which the opposition seeks to table and respond.
Thank you. So before I come to you, Senator Birmingham, Senator O'Sullivan, the minister has invited you to show him the document so he may consider the response. Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. On indulgence, given the invitation of the acting Leader of the Government in the Senate, here it is, and perhaps you'd like to read the highlighted line to the chamber.
Senator Birmingham. We're going to go back to the question. I've asked the minister to respond to the question and to be relevant to the question. Minister.
Thank you, President. And look,
order.
I don't think I can be any clearer about the actions that this government has been taking to reduce the price of electricity in this country for both.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator O'Sullivan. Just a moment, Senator O'Sullivan. Senator Watt. Senator O'Sullivan.
Point of order on direct relevance. The question was very tight, and we assisted the minister by providing him Labor's policy.
Senator O'Sullivan, in relation to Senator Watt, seriously. Order. The minister has agreed to look at what you're seeking to table. In relation to your question and your last point of order, I have directed him to the question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Look, this government is serious about putting downward pressure on electricity prices. We came to office with a former government with something like 22...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator O'Sullivan, second supplementary.
Will the minister say the words $275?
Minister Farrell. I am going to sit the minister down again until there is respectful silence from both sides. Thank you, Senator Green. Senator Gallagher. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President, and thank the senator for his second supplementary question. This government is serious about putting downward pressure on electricity prices. I don't think I can be any clearer than that. And right from the time that we took office, we started taking action.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator McGrath, you are clearly out of order, and I will ask you to listen in respectful silence. Minister Farrell.
We started taking action on putting downward pressure on electricity prices
Farrell,
in a way.
Please resume your seat. Senator O'Sullivan.
Direct relevance, President. I asked the question, will the minister say the words $275? Because that's what they promised to the Australian people.
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. I will direct the minister to your question. Minister Farrell.
Well, can I say this, Senator? I'm not going to be not going to have words or amounts put into my mouth. We have been the government. We have been the government. We have been the government with the opposition
thank you, Minister.
opposed
The
to
time
cutting
for answering
electricity.
has expired. Senator Babet.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Having previously denied a link between money printing and inflation, RBA Governor Dr Philip Lowe finally admitted during recent Senate estimates that the expansion of the money supply, low interest rates and government support during the pandemic has driven inflation. Prior to the 2022 election, the former coalition government ran up hundreds of billions of dollars of debt with little to show for it but some expired PCR tests and, of course, an artificially inflated property market, where it's nearly impossible for first home buyers to get into the market. Now, do you believe that the irresponsible and unprecedented debt accumulated by the former government has contributed to the inflationary pressures that are currently being felt by ordinary Australians? And I will remind you as well that the Labor Party was also in agreement with most of this.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Babet for the question and also for his advice that he would be asking a question relating to debt and inflation. And I would agree with Senator Babet that the significant increase in government debt that was increased under the former government, a lot of that, they doubled the debt before the pandemic hit, has certainly led to the budget being in worse shape than it needed to be, and that there wasn't enough to show for the debt that we currently carry, and that managing that debt burden is the fastest growing area in the budget, is managing the interest burden on that debt. So it is a big problem, and it is a big issue that we are having to manage as we work our way through the decisions we're taking in this budget. I think the inflation challenge has certainly been made worse by the failure in energy policy. 9 years of failure to deal with the reality of a changing energy market, and the fact that we haven't been able to be ahead of that and have in place policies that have been able to deal with it has certainly contributed, because one of the biggest contributors to inflation, of course, has been energy prices, impacted by the war in Ukraine, but absolutely also impacted by the failure of those opposite to land an agreed energy policy. 22 of them, not one of them landed, and the fact that we are now dealing with the results of that has certainly been had an impact on inflation, which is why we took the steps we took at the end of last year to put in place caps, to put in place the interventions that we did, unusual as they were, to make sure we were putting downward pressure on inflation and bills at the same time.
Has expired. Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Now, I guess we're in agreement now that increased government spending does indeed contribute to high inflation. So, why is the government, the Labor government, not responsibly attempting to heavily reduce spending to balance the budget and to actually make a start on repaying our nation's debt? Why all the big spending?
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Babet for the supplementary. Well, I would say to Senator Babet, the October budget banked 99% of the revenue upgrades that we received through that budget update. 99%. It's unprecedented, and I think that goes to show the approach that the Treasurer, Dr Chalmers, and I take in terms of budget management. And it's not just how much you spend; it's the quality of the spend. Are the investments you're making driving an economic outcome, an economic or social outcome? So our childcare investments, our investments in cleaner and cheaper energy, our investments in medicines, all of those things. It's about the quality of the spend. We don't want to pork barrel our way around the country like those opposite did. We need to make sure that every dollar that's spent is invested in the productive capacity of our country and improves the living standards of Australians.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babet, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. So I guess it's pretty clear that all governments lack the courage to cut spending because it's unpleasant to do so. Now, will you rule out future taxes on the family home, and will you confirm that your government will proceed with the Stage 3 tax cuts to ensure that Australians can keep more of their own money and keep up with the rising costs of living? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister.
Thank you. Well, on the question around taxes on the family home, we understand the importance of the family home, and it will remain exempt from capital gains tax. I think the Prime Minister and Treasurer have made that clear in recent weeks, and our position on Stage 3 hasn't changed. On the spending side, I think we do need to acknowledge that significant amounts, the vast proportion of spending in the Commonwealth budget is in payments through our social security system and payments to the states and territories. These are, significant parts of the budget. So when people say they want, to see big cuts to things, you have to be understanding that that means big cuts to sort of social programs that people value, or payments to the states and territories. So we are fiscally responsible. We do have an eye on budget repair, but we're going to be cautious about how we approach it, because we know people rely on services that the Australian budget funds.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator White.
My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Senator Watt. Victoria has one of the largest Indian diasporas in Australia, and so they're extremely interested in the Prime Minister Albanese's recent trip to India. I have had many constituents ask me about it, and I was wondering if you could elaborate further on what Prime Minister Albanese's discussions with Prime Minister Modi were about, and provide an update on how Aussie farmers will benefit from the Prime Minister's recent trip to India.
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And isn't it good that one senator in this chamber has some questions about agriculture? And I'm not surprised it comes and India, and it's not surprising that it comes from Senator White, who comes from good farming stock herself. And I know not that long ago attended a very important event with the dairy industry in Tatura, just outside Shepparton, and I thank her for doing so. Well, the Prime Minister's recent trip to India, where he, of course, was triumphantly accompanied by his diligent Trade Minister, Senator Farrell, was obviously a great success. And it really underscored the value of the relationship between our two countries, because this is a relationship that runs far deeper than just on the cricket field. India was Australia's sixth largest two-way goods and services trading partner at $34.3 billion last year, and that number is continuing to grow. And much like Australia, agriculture is a massive part of India's economy and its identity. And that's why it was so exciting to announce that Australia and India had agreed on two-way agricultural trade to provide new market access for Australian Hass avocados to India and access for Indian okra to Australia. This is a significant market access opportunity for Australian avocado producers, and the good people of India will now be introduced to the wonders of smashed avocado, whether it be on a Saturday morning or any other day, right across India. The opening of this new export market has been estimated by industry as having a potential market value of approximately $25 million. So it's not surprising that this deal, negotiated by the Albanese government, has been welcomed by industry groups across the board, including the Australian Fresh Produce Association, who said this new access is expected to provide a significant boost to the Australian avocado industry, supporting the sector's continued growth over the long term. And unsurprisingly, Avocados Australia backed in the announcement, saying it's a tremendous achievement and our growers and packers are very keen to prepare their businesses for India.
Has expired. Senator White, first supplementary.
Thanks very much for acknowledging my family's history with Tatura, where my grandparents were interned and did in fact work in agriculture, so I appreciate that acknowledgement of those great people. During his visit, Prime Minister Albanese also welcomed the recent entry into the force of ECTA. Can the minister explain how the ECTA is already benefiting Aussie farmers? And ECTA, of course, is the India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement.
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Watt.
I'd be delighted. I'd be delighted to do so, Senator White. And again, it's good to have people on one side of the chamber who actually have real experience in agriculture going back decades, rather than people who just like to talk a lot about it. I know some of us have got a little hobby farm outside Warwick. You know, we whack on the RMs on the weekend and get the old ride-on mower out and, you know, put on the hat. But there's a few people who actually care about agriculture and know a little bit about it. Previously, exports to India peaked at $3.38 billion Australian dollars in 2016 on the back of then-record grain and pulse production. But changes to Indian tariffs on grains and pulses resulted in reduced Australian production, which had a massive impact on farmers across the country. The India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement came into force on December 2022, and it's already proving to be a win for Aussie farmers. Not only is it opening up new markets for our top-quality products, but we're also seeing the removal or reduction of tariffs on existing trade. This presents great opportunities for Australian farmers.
The time for answering has expired. Senator White, order. Senator White, second supplementary.
Thank you so much for that answer. Can the minister outline what the Albanese government is doing to support Aussie farmers, processors and exporters to take advantage of the new market access opportunities like those with India?
Minister Watt.
Thank you again, Senator White. And you know, whether it be the wilds of Warwick or the coffee shops of Elwood, we know the coalition are very strong when it comes to agriculture.
Senator Watt,
the Albanese government
Watt,
is focused on
Minister
opening.
Watt, resume your seat. Once again, the interjections are disorderly. I would ask you to listen in silence, Minister Watt. Senator McGrath, may I remind you to stand and wait for me to come to you?
That is a good reminder. A direct relevance to the question that was asked, as much as Warwick has some wild areas, particularly at my local pub, which you should come to sometime, Minister. I'd ask the Minister.
Senator McGrath, that is not a point of order. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. The Albanese government is focused on opening doors for Australia's agriculture and processing industries to grow and diversify their overseas markets. India's large population and diversifying economy is creating new demand for premium and healthy produce, which Australia is well placed to deliver on. Specifically, rising consumer incomes and increasing rates of urbanisation in India mean that opportunities are likely to be concentrated in the rapidly growing high-end produce market. These are the types of opportunities that will present themselves because of other key free trade agreements which are still being finalised, including with the UK and the EU. It's hoped that the UK deal will be finalised shortly, which would be a major boost to Australia's beef, lamb and in particular our sugar industry, and I want to acknowledge all the work of people from DAF, DFAT and others.
The time for answering has expired. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. I regrettably ask that further questions be put on the notice paper, and happy to accept the Powering Australia policy, which I recommend all of the coalition to read.
Thank you.